Hi, it's Eric here with CAD Avenue. Today I'm going to be taking you through a really, hopefully quick tutorial on the commands that you will find inside AViCAD. Now these commands are exactly the same as what you would find in AutoCAD, so it could be a review for somebody using AutoCAD as well. I'm going to be showing you the shortcuts. So typically there'd be 2 to 3 character commands. And then I'll be showing you a few menus as well. Things that are important to know before you start using CAD, or things that you should know in order to become more proficient at CAD and getting your drawings done a bit quicker. Just to explain, AViCAD does create DWG files. There's also BAK files and autosave files. So if you crash or have a power outage or whatever, you can retrieve your saved drawings pretty easily. It also uses drawing template files, and that's kind of the first thing I'm going to show you. Same as AutoCAD, you can create a standard template that you could maybe have your title block on, and then it would hold all your settings as well. If you're doing a lot of drawings, it's advised that you create a template like that. Your template could also have general notes on it and so forth. Let me go ahead and show you the first keyboard command, which is the N key for new. And that loads up the template file dialog here. Important to select the pcad.dwt if you're Imperial, and the pcad iso.dwt. Typically what you would do is you would just choose this file and then open it. But I'm going to check something first. I want to show you a way so that you don't have to do that every time. It basically defaults to the right template. So if you load the wrong template, let's say you load the metric template, your dim scale settings and your dimension styles and things like that are going to be off. So let me just check one thing here. I'll go into the OP command, which is options. And by the way, I'll leave a PDF file with all these commands and what they actually do and mean it's at the bottom of this video, so you can grab that. So here we got the autosave settings and the autosave file, which I spoke about just recently. And then we have the directory that these are saved to. And if you want, let's say if you were to lose one of these, all you have to do is right click, rename, and then rename the extension to a DWG. And so now we have that file renamed, and then we could just open it from there if we wanted to. If you go to the path file setting and go down to templates and highlight this, you'll see that I have loaded my default template. Now in a new setup, this will be blank. Let me show you how to set this up. So you highlight it, then you choose browse, then you browse to the template folder, which should automatically come up here, and then choose either the Imperial or the metric. Make sure to do that if you're going to be using AViCAD on a regular basis. Otherwise you'll have to keep remembering that whole step. So along with the options menu, there's also the drawing settings, which is DS. And here I'll just show you one of these tabs. The dynamic input tab, for example, allows us to show these commands that I'm going to be discussing today at the cursor. So it's real helpful to have that turned on, especially during this video, so you can see that. A dialog box that probably should mention is your units command, which fires up a dialog that looks like this. And here you'll see your unit types. You'll want to choose one of these based on the kind of drawing that you're doing. Now these aren't the values that are displayed in your drawing, but instead they are in your command line. So for example, if you're typing in a 2 foot, you might get something like 24.0 depending on which one of these you have, or you'll see 2 foot 0 inches if you have architectural turned on. Although you probably don't need it right now in the drawing process, it's something that you should be aware of. So the next command I want to show you is pretty basic. It's the save command, which is SA. Allows us to save our document and pick the folder that we want to save it to. Otherwise, you can just press the file and save here. Doing this defaults to the folder a drawing was last saved at. On our left here is the property palette. If we were to close this out and we wanted to reopen that again, it's PR for properties. I'm going to be showing you how to use this in just a bit. Down here is our command line. If you don't see that, you can type the command line, and you can actually choose where you want that to be. But it's best, I think, to have it at the bottom there. And now for the most basic command, it's the line command. We use this in MetQ to do a construction line input, which you can see in some of our videos. In order to use this, we just use direct distance, pointing the cursor in the direction of where we want to go, and then typing the distance in, and then pressing enter. So the next command is our rectangle command, which is REC. Pretty basic, so you just enter one corner in and then the other. You can draw in a rectangle that way. Not too much else to say about that, other than when you click on objects, you'll have these grips that you'll see. Grips are a way of moving the object. So if we wanted to, we could stretch this rectangle up this way, or we can, move this over as well. Grips are also a way to run commands under. If we click on this grip here, we are automatically in the stretch command. But if we press our space bar, now we're in the move command, and then again, now we're in the rotate command. So a real quick way to get to those common editing commands. Here's scale, we can scale that, and then mirror, and so forth, and then there's stretch again. Let's just go through those commands. If you were to run those same commands individually, so S is for stretch. We just select the box that we want, and then we press enter, and then we stretch it accordingly. And then there's M for move, and that's to just move this. And then there's RO for rotate. You want to note that after each command, you'll want to press the enter key or accept different options at the command line. There's the mirror command. That's MI. And here it's asking me if I want to delete the entities. And that just does a flip-flop there. And then there's the SC command for scale. SC. Asking for the base point. And then the scale factor if we wanted to do 1.2, for example. So play around with that, and then also play around with the spacebar command after you select the grips. So next I'm going to show you how you would change this rectangle into a dashed line or a dashed rectangle. So you select it here, then you come over to line type here, and then you choose either the dashed or the hidden line here. And then you'll notice that the scale is very, very small. So we can change that by using the LT scale command, or LTS, and then just enter the scale that we require. The higher the number, the larger the the spacing. Next is the list command, so it's LI. So that allows us to select an object, press enter, and then we can find out different things about this object. So here it's telling us the area, what layer it's on, and then the line type here. So real useful to use that sometimes if you need to know more about a specific object in your drawing. Okay, next I'm going to show you how to use the zoom command. Zoom is just Z for zoom, and then zooming into the area that you want. And then there's Z, enter, and then P, enter. And that goes back to the previous view. And then if you type Z, you'll see a bunch of options down here. Zoom extents is another one. So Z and then the E. You can also click on these commands as well. So you have that option. To get out of a previous command or to get out of a command altogether, you just press the escape key. So the enter and the escape key are really widely used, and they're opposites really. So to enter, you're accepting the value. When you escape, you're escaping out of the command altogether and then going back to an empty command prompt. So another commonly used command is the erase command. So if I wanted to erase this, I click on it and then I press E for erase. If I want to undo that, there's Control Z, which is a Windows shortcut really. Control C copies, and then Control V will do a paste. So those are really useful. Another way to copy something is to just type in CO for copy. Select the entity or the object and then just copy it wherever you want. To undo what I just did there is Control Z. Another way to undo something is to type the U command in, and you can just keep pressing enter to undo anything. Like you can even undo a zoom, for example. So in CAD, all those steps are being kept track of, every single step, whether it be an erase, copy, zoom. Those are all undoable by pressing U and then enter. Immediately after the last command, if you press enter, you will fire up that exact command over again without actually having to retype it. Now I'm going to kind of change gears a little bit and talk about dimensioning and also dim scale. So if we wanted to dimension this this side of the rectangle, so let me first erase this by typing the E, enter. Anyways, so if I wanted to dimension this piece of pipe here to the center line here to the end here, there's a couple things I'm going to want to do. The first is checking my Osnaps. So down here is an icon. It's got a square and then a small square in the upper right corner there. If we first check to make sure this is actually blue and activated, and then we right click and go to eSnap settings, you can see here that I have endpoint, midpoint, and node turned on. A node is a good one to have turned on if we're working in 3D especially. Endpoint and midpoint are pretty typical. So is intersection, and perpendicular is another typical one. In order to do a dimension, we have to have endpoint turned on, and then midpoint is something good to turn on as well. To do a dimension, we type in the command DLI for dimension linear, and then we place point here. You can see that I'm snapping here. It says that there's an endpoint, and then I can come up here to my midpoint. You see the little triangle? That's the snap indicator, and it's just a matter of left clicking on that indicator and then placing our extension line in. Now the other thing I wanted to talk about, and it's a little advanced, but it's a very necessary thing to understand, is that in order to change the text size of this dimension, we don't go in and try to change the text size in the dimension settings. What we do instead is we use what's called dim scale. Let's type that in. And the scale factor is going to all be dependent on the size of our drawing. Now this goes in conjunction with paper space, what we're going to be talking about later. But let me just show you how to use this. So we know that the dim scale is set way too low. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in 12, and then we're going to update this dimension here that we've already done. And the way we do that is we type in dim, then update, and then all. So those are just keywords that you're going to have to remember. And then we can just press enter. And then that changes the scale factor of that dimension string. It also changes the scale factor of the arrows, so that both the arrows and the text becomes bigger. So let me show you that again. So it's dim and scale 24, then dim, update, and then all. So what you have to do is you have to find the size that you need, as I said, according to your plot scale or your paper size, really. So both those two things will determine the size of that. And let me just skip ahead a little ways because I need to show you a little bit about paper space and what that means. So if we toggle into one of these tabs here, this is called paper space. We can see here that our drawing fits on this piece of paper pretty well. And that's sort of what I mean is, let's say if the drawing were too big for this piece of paper, we would have to zoom out, and then the scaling of this would become smaller and smaller to the point we wouldn't be able to see it. It really depends on how big your drawing is and how big your paper is. I'll talk more about that in just a bit. So let's go back into model space here. So model space is our working area. Paper space is used when we're getting ready to set up our paper, our title block, and all those kinds of things, and then finally print and plot. So another command that you may use frequently is the radius dimensioning. So it's DRA for dimension radius. So we can select an arc and then locate it as we need. So before you start dimensioning, typically you want to go into the D command for dim style. And in this case, we're using a standard style here, which is Imperial. We click modify. Here we can choose, arrows or tick marks or whatever we need here. We also want to look at the primary units, and if we wanted to use fractional or architectural, we would choose those here. I can show you an example of that. So if we did another dimension here, the DLI command, and let's say we're dimensioning it in this direction, you can see now it says 70 7/8 inch. Now notice that this dimension did not change after I put this new dimension in. We need to run that dim update all sequence of commands in order to update this. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is text. And text basically is treated independently of dim scale, unlike dimensions. So the easiest way that I can explain this is to provide you with a cheat sheet, which basically does the math for you as far as figuring out what size text you want to use with a certain plot size. Have a look at the cheat sheet at cadavenue.com/DWG scale for drawing scale. So currently I'm using a dim scale of 24, which equates to a 1/2 inch equals a foot when we set that up to plot. Now this is all going to be based on how big our drawing is. The bigger our drawing, of course, the smaller our scale is going to have to be. But in this example, I set it to 24. If we come over to this column, which is a 3/16 plotted text height, is what we have set currently. We're going to want to use a 4.5 inch size text for our annotations that we would do in model space. So next I'm going to be talking about the text command and also text styles, which you'll need to understand as well. But here's a brief overview of it. So you'll find text styles in the Annotate tab here. Click on the text style icon here. And I'm using the standard style, which is the current style, based on that template I opened. Now I've already set it in this drawing to 4.5 inches, and that's basically what it needs to be set at. But this is the box that you're going to need to look at. So set that to 4.5 inches, and that is going to end up being the same height as what we show here using that dim scale of 24. So in order to fire up the text command, we just type in T for text, and it's going to ask us for a box. And here we'll have a kind of like a word processor bar up on top here. And here you can see that 4.5 inches. And it's just a matter of typing in what we need. I can take it and grip it, use my space bar, and then move it down if I need to, or move it over this way if I need to. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about is multi-leader. So multi-leader basically is a leader, but it's got several options. So we can get into the options by typing M leader and then style. And here we can go in and we can modify the style. Currently it's set to a maximum of 2 points. I mean, we could make that 3. Make sure that the size is set to the same size as the text size here. It does not associate itself with dim style. The content as well should be the same as the M text size. So just check those if your arrows and text aren't big enough or are small enough. So once we set that, type in MLD for multi-leader. First point is the arrow, and then the second and third point, and then the text will appear. We'll just type in valve and then click out of that, and that's how you do that. And the next thing I want to talk about is ortho and polar tracking. Polar tracking is used mainly in 3D drawings, whereas 2D drawings, ortho should be good enough. You could use polar in 2D drawings. This will give you the ability to snap to 45-degree angles or any angle you specify. So make sure this is activated first. You can also activate it using your F8 key. So F8 would be your shortcut, or you can just simply toggle it on here. So when it's toggled off, and then let's do another M leader command. See, this way I have full control of the angle of that leader. Now if I wanted to temporarily lock the ortho on, I can hold the shift key and then type in my my text. Click out of it. In addition, the shortcut to the polar tracking setting is F10. And one thing I didn't really touch on earlier when we were going over the zoom command is the pan command. So the pan can be done normally with your mouse and your scroll wheel. So if you hold that down, you can pan around. You can also type in the P command to pan, or if you're in the middle of a command, you can activate that pan command using the using the scroll bar on your mouse, which is handy. So keep that in mind. Let me briefly touch on how you select entities, because that's super important. Should have probably touched on that earlier as well. So if I wanted to select everything to do about this annotation, I can select it from left to lower right, and then activate my command. Let me escape out of that. Or I can select it from bottom right to upper left. And when I do this, everything within the crossing of that selection gets selected. Whereas the other way, let's say if I only select this, it's not going to select it because the whole thing is not in the window. Whereas with a crossing, I can select it more easily. Since this is all one group, it's selected by its entirety. Now let's get into a little bit about paper space. Go back to that. As I mentioned earlier, these styles that we created are all based on the paper size and the scale factor. Now the scale are all based on the paper size and the plot scale. Now adjusting the scale of this paper or the plot can only be adjusted by activating model space within paper space. And the way that you do that is you type MS for model space, and that gives you this dark outline to let you know that it's activated. And now it's like we're peering down into model space. So there's a hole in our paper, and we're looking down into the model space area where we were previously. And we can scale this drawing up and down just by zooming in and out of it, and then locking it into the scale. So typing PS for paper space to lock it. Now this is totally the wrong scale that we want to plot it at. So if we go back to our cheat sheet, the scale that we want this to be plotted at is 1/2 inch equals a foot because we're using the scale factor of 24. So let's just see what happens when we do that. So let's type MS for model space again, and then come down to this little icon down here, click it, and then choose 1/2 inch equals a foot, which is right here. And that scales it just right. If we were to put a real scale onto this drawing, it would measure properly. You'll notice that on this piece of paper, the grids are everywhere. If we go back into model space again, we can turn this off here and then activate paper space again. You can do the same thing in model space as well. Turn off your grids just using this little shortcut down here. That's the easiest way. Now keep in mind you can draw right directly on paper space as well. I mean, this is really good for notes. So an easy way to do this, rather than fiddle with our styles here for standards, we can create a new style. We'll just go here and we'll say new, and we'll just say plot, and that will be our style called plot. In this window, we want to do some quick math. 3 divided by 16. I believe that's 0.1875, and choose apply. So now we got this plot style up here just for our text on our sheet, and now we can just use that mtext command just like before. And now this annotation matches this annotation, even though this is in paper space, this one is in model space. Hopefully that's clear. We do have some videos on paper space and model space if you wanted to learn more about that. And as always, feel free to ask me questions or leave a comment underneath the video if you're on YouTube. We didn't really touch on the circle command, the polyline command, or the polygon command. Let's just draw these right on paper space just to demonstrate. So the circle command is C, so we can draw a circle, for example, there. The polyline command is PL, and it's just allows you to create a series of points, as I'm showing here, and then using the close command C to close the shape. We also have what's called the hatch command, which is the H, which allows you to hatch a certain area, like the inside of a polygon. You can fiddle with that. That's got lots of settings inside there as far as scaling and so forth, and hatch patterns. And then our polygon command is just POL. and it's going to ask you for the number of sides. So let's just go for a triangle. The center. Then it's going to ask you to inscribe it around the circle or in the circle. And then using your mouse to scale that as you need. So let's select these with a crossing like I was showing you earlier, and just let's erase them. Let's go back into model space next, and I'll show you just a couple more commands and then we'll be finished. So let's zoom up a little bit. Let's do a trim command. I guess the best way to do this is to draw a rectangle and then draw a line going through the rectangle. And we'll just copy this line. We'll copy another line over for another command I'm going to show you. But the trim command is TR. Select the entity that we want to trim to, and then the side that we want to trim out. The extend command is kind of a little bit like the opposite of that, and it's EX for extend. Again, you click the entity that you want to extend to, and then you pick the entity that you want to extend, like this. The layer menu is LA. Now, luckily, MetQ creates all these layers for us, but we can turn off and on some of these layers, and we can create new layers, and then, for example, put our notes on a different layer. The way to create a new layer is just click this icon here, and then give it a name. We can just click the default for layer 1. In this menu, you can turn off certain layers not to plot, and then you can turn them off in your drawing or freeze them. These are almost the same thing. Freezing is just a little bit different, and it takes up less memory. In addition, let me just turn off one of these layers, and I'll show you what happens. So we'll turn off the pipe layer, and then we'll exit this, and then you'll see that there is no pipe anymore. And we can do the undo key, the Control Z, to turn that back on. In addition, in the Home tab, click on Layers. There's also some tools in here. One of these is called Isolate, which allows you to isolate, let's say, the dimensions. As you can see, I drew some of these things on the wrong layer, such as this, but we can undo that as well. So the whole idea really with layers, if you're working on your own layers, is to activate the layer that you want to be drawing on first, such as the text layer. Then put your text on. If it's on the wrong layer, then you can move it to the text layer. Let me give you an example of how you would do that. So if we select the valve text here, or better yet, if we go to the isolate layer, and then we isolate just the layer that this text is on, we can take these pieces that are on the wrong layer and then move them just by coming down here and then picking text, and then that moves it to that layer. Now that text layer just happens to be off, so we can just turn it on like so. There's an easy way to actually turn all those layers back on through this menu here. So if you select the first layer, the one that's turned off, see all of them that are turned off right now, and then the last layer, and hold your shift key down at the same time, then you can just turn them all off and all on as you need. So I know there's been a lot of stuff in this video, but as I said, I'm going to be leaving some notes in a PDF file. I'm sure there's something that I've missed, but this should give you a good start in case you're a beginner or perhaps want to re-explore maybe using shortcuts a little more in your drawing process. And thanks for watching, and please comment or subscribe.